2,500 years ago, some miners south of Athens hit silver, a lot of it, enough that the city woke up rich overnight with no idea what to do about it. There were about 20,000 men who counted as citizens. Split it evenly, and each one got roughly 10 drachmas. Call it 10 days' pay. Free money in a town where most men had never had 10 days' pay spare in their lives. The vote was basically done, and everybody wanted it, which of course they did. Then one man stood up and said, "Give it back, all of it, every coin, and spend the lot on warships." And somehow he won. 3 years later, the Persian army marched in and burned Athens flat. The city was gone. Everything Athens had left was sitting in the water at a place called Salamis. Now here is the bit nobody tells you. The ships are not the interesting part. What happened to that man afterwards is the interesting part. And I will come back to it. Because it is not what you think. So, why start there? Because there were two kinds of men in that room, and both of them were trying to help. The ones who wanted to hand out the silver were being useful, really useful. They were putting real money in 20,000 pockets that same week. Every one of those men would have thanked them, and nobody would have remembered their names by the next spring. The other man was not being useful. He was being something else, and that something else is the whole reason his name is still around. That is the gap this video is about. Useful and necessary sound like the same thing. They are not even close. And once you see the difference, you cannot stop seeing it, starting with your own job, because here it is, plainly. The most useful man in your building is the one they will never promote. Sit with that, because I am not complaining about fairness. I am telling you how the thing works. Being useful means you supply something, and whatever you supply gets used up, thanked for, and asked for again next Tuesday. Nobody protects a supply. They protect a source. So here is the question that quietly decides your next 10 years. When you are off for 2 weeks, does the work get harder, or does it just get slower? Be honest, because there is no middle answer. If it gets slower, you are a supply. Somebody picks it up, makes a mess of it for a fortnight, then gets the hang of it. If it gets harder, then something walked out of that building with you that nobody ever wrote down. Almost nobody asks himself that question. The building worked out the answer years ago and never mentioned it. Now, before anybody types it, this is not about hoarding, not hiding the password, not being deliberately vague, not making yourself the bottleneck so nothing moves without you. That trick gets spotted inside about 18 months, and once it is spotted, you stop being useful to them and start being a problem they solve on a schedule you never get shown. This is about 4 grades, 4 different things you can be to the people you work for, and a great many capable men are stuck on the second one with no idea there are 2 above it. I will lay out all 4. I will tell you what each one costs and what it buys, and somewhere around the 3rd one, you are going to think of something you have been proud of for years and see what it actually got you. That part is not pleasant, and it is where a lot of people switch off. It is also the whole point. Machiavelli wrote a chapter about how a ruler should handle the men working under him, and there is one line in it people skim straight past. He said, when a ruler finds a man who thinks about the ruler's problems instead of his own, the ruler should tie that man to him, give him honors, make him comfortable, lock him in so tight he cannot picture himself anywhere else. Look at what that actually is. That is not a thank you. That is a ruler protecting himself from a loss. That is the 4th grade, written down 500 years ago, and nobody has ever got there by being helpful. 3 words in the comments before we carry on. I get kept. Type it, and watch whether it actually feels true while your thumb is moving. For most of you, it will not. In about 20 minutes, you will know exactly why. Here is the rule, sitting underneath all 4 grades, and it is simple enough to hold in one hand. A company values whatever it would have a hard time replacing, not what it likes, not what it appreciates, what it would have a hard time replacing. Men mix those up constantly, and I understand why. Appreciation is loud. Being replaceable is silent. Nobody has ever walked past your desk and said, by the way, We reckon we could have somebody doing your job to your standard in about 4 weeks. But somebody has done that sum. Somebody is paid to do it. And here is the part that stings. Effort is the most common thing in any building. Every company has more willing people than it has good judgment. So, a man who competes on effort is competing in the one market where there is far too much supply. Thanked, constantly, moved, never. Now, here is where I go against something almost everybody says, and I want to put their side fairly first. The standard advice is, make yourself indispensable. Be the one they cannot do without. Every mentor says it. Every article says it. And it sounds obviously right. I think it is the most expensive piece of career advice going. Indispensable where you are now is a cage. Think about it. If your department genuinely falls over without you doing exactly the job you do today, then moving you breaks the department, so they do not move you. They keep you exactly where you are, and they protect you there, because you are holding the roof up. Nobody moves the wall that is holding the roof up. There is a man in your building in year 11 of that, best in his function by a distance, and in the same chair through 4 reorganizations, because each time his area could not be disrupted. He was told to become indispensable. He did it. It worked exactly as promised, and that is the tragedy. So the target is not indispensable. The target is expensive to lose, and the distance between those two is what the next 20 minutes are about. 4 grades. Learn them by name, because you are going to place yourself on one before this is over, and the men in the pack who reach the 4th will find it was never about working harder. Thanked, relied on, consulted, kept. They are not levels of how much you do. They are levels of what happens to the building when you stop. The 1st grade is thanked. You did something extra. Stayed late, covered a gap, fixed the thing that was not yours. Somebody noticed and said so, and it felt good, and it should have. Here is what a thank you actually is. It is a receipt. It closes the deal. The second somebody thanks you, the account is settled, and it is settled at the price you asked for, which was nothing. That is not me being bitter. That is just the maths. A man does 3 extra weeks flat out, gets a warm and completely genuine thank you from somebody senior, and 6 months later, that never comes up once in any conversation about his future. Not because anyone is ungrateful, because it was already paid, and there is an older problem underneath it that has been measured for over a century. Back in 1913, a French engineer called Ringelmann got men to pull on a rope and measured what came out. One man on his own pulled a certain amount. Put 2 on, and you did not get double. By the time he had 8 men on that rope, each one was pulling about half of what he managed alone. Nobody was slacking on purpose. That is the point. Effort in a group just gets swallowed, and no one man's share shows up in the total. Look up the Ringelmann effect. Then, look at your own week. Most of what you do is on the rope. The move is not to stop helping. It is to notice which of your extra work leaves a trace with your name on it, and which of it disappears into the total. If you cannot name the trace, you were thanked. Thanks is a receipt. The 2nd grade is relied on. This is where the trap closes on almost everybody. Being relied on feels like a rival. People plan around you. Your name goes onto the schedule as a given rather than a question. When something matters, it comes to you first, and there is real pleasure in that, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But look at what they are actually relying on. They are relying on the job getting done well. You happen to be the man doing it. The reliance is real. It just is not about you. And a job can be handed over. That is what a job is. Every hour you spend making your work tidier, better written down, more predictable, you are polishing the job. And a polished job is easier to give to somebody else. And here is the honest trap at the middle of all this. The exact behavior that makes you good at your job is the same behavior that makes you cheap to lose. Nobody ever says that out loud, because it sounds like I am telling you to be sloppy. I am not saying that. Do the work properly, write it down properly, and just understand that when you finish, the company owns it, and nobody gets paid twice for handing over something he built once. The move for grade 2 is about direction rather than volume. For every piece of work you make more transferable, put 1 hour into something that is not a relationship outside your reporting line, a piece of judgment nobody has written down, a result with your name attached that somebody outside the building would recognize. 1 hour against 40. That ratio is fine. A decade at 0 is not. Relied on is a role. 1 word before the 3rd grade. If you left tomorrow, would the work get harder or just slower? Harder or slower? That is the whole comment, and I would guess 4 out of 5 of you are about to type slower. The 3rd grade is consulted, and it is the first one that is about you rather than about the work. Consulted means they ask before they decide, not after, not as an update. Before, while the thing is still open, when your answer can still change the outcome. Completely different transaction, and most men have never had it. They have had the other version, which is being informed early and feeling pleased about it, and from the outside those two are nothing alike. Here is the difference. They tell you things because of your job title. They ask you things because of your judgment. And judgment is the first thing in this whole video that cannot be handed over. There is research on this worth an evening of your time. Gary Klein spent years watching experienced fire commanders make calls under pressure, and what he found surprised everybody, including the commanders themselves. They were not weighing up options. They were not comparing plans. They walked in, recognized the shape of it from 20 years of other fires, and moved. Half the time they could not tell you afterwards what they had actually seen. Look it up under recognition prime decision-making. That is what judgment is. Years of experience squashed down into a second. And you cannot hand that to anyone at any speed, because the man who has it usually cannot put it into words himself. Now, the part I said would be unpleasant. Think about the thing you were most proud of this year. For most men, it is a process, a system, a piece of automation that took something difficult and made it routine. That was good work, and I am not taking it away from you. But look at what it did. You took a thing that required your judgment and converted it into a thing that requires none. You built an asset and handed it over in the same motion, and in 3 years nobody will remember it came from you, because well-built things are invisible by design. The correction is not to build worse things. It is to make sure that at any given moment, at least one thing you do is still unsolved. The frontier piece, the one that still needs you, because nobody has worked it out. A man whose entire function is finished systems is a man who has finished. And finished men get thanked. I hold the judgment. Now, stop for 30 seconds and do this properly. Name the last time somebody asked your opinion before deciding something, rather than telling you after it was decided. If you have to go back more than a month, you are on grade 2, whatever your title says. And settle something for me. Because this one divides people hard. Is the most useful man in a company the most valuable one, or the most exploited one? Half of you will say usefulness is the entire point of employment and everything else is politics. The other half have watched a brilliant man get thanked for 11 years and passed over 4 times. Pick a side, valuable or exploited. Now back to Athens, because I owe you the rest of it. The man who stood up was Themistocles. And by the accounts we have, he did not even make the argument about Persia. Persia sounded far away and speculative. He framed the whole thing around a nearer quarrel, with a rival city just across the water, which was a fight the room could actually picture. He won. The silver went into a fleet. The sources disagree about how many ships, so I am not going to hand you a figure I cannot stand behind. 3 years later, when the Persian force came, that fleet was the only thing Athens still had. At Salamis, it destroyed a navy several times its size in a strait so narrow that numbers stopped functioning. He did not make himself useful. He made himself necessary, and he did it by producing the one thing the city's survival depended on, which did not exist until he insisted on it against the room's own preference. And here is the honest half, because this is not a fairy tale and I am not going to sell you one. They ostracized him anyway, voted him out of Athens by the ordinary procedure not many years afterwards. He ended his life in exile, in the service of the Persian king, governing a city that had been his enemy. So, being necessary did not make him safe. Nothing makes you safe. Nothing has ever made anybody safe. What it bought was a decade in which nothing important in Athens could be settled without him, and a city that survived to have a history at all. Those are the actual returns. Safety was never on the table for anybody in that room. You can look this up under Themistocles and the mines at Laurium. Herodotus is the main source. The details are argued over by serious people, and it is worth an evening. Which brings us to the fourth grade, kept. Kept means the organization arranges things so that you do not leave. Not because they are fond of you, because losing you costs more than accommodating you. And there is research that explains why this grade works completely differently from the other three. In 1979, Kahneman and Tversky put a name to something called loss aversion, and the finding is simple and huge. Losing something hurts more than gaining the same thing feels good. The number that keeps coming up is about 2 to 1. A man will fight roughly twice as hard to keep a thing as he ever would to get it in the first place. Look it up under loss aversion. Now put that against the 4 grades. If you are useful, you are a gain, and gains get looked at calmly, compared with other options, and swapped out when something better turns up. If you are necessary, you are a possible loss, and nobody looks at a possible loss calmly. That is the whole difference between grade 2 and grade 4. It is not a difference of degree. It is a different part of the mind doing the arithmetic. So what actually gets a man there? 3 things, and none of them is effort. Judgment that is not written down. The reason a decision was made in a way that looks insane if you only read the outcome. Relationships that are yours rather than the roles. The test takes 4 seconds. Of the people you deal with, how many would take your call if you moved to a different company tomorrow, not out of politeness, but because they wanted to hear from you? And a name that exists outside the building, not fame. About 6 people elsewhere who could describe accurately what you are good at and would pick up. Roughly 2 years of very ordinary effort. Almost nobody does it deliberately. Losing me costs more. Name your grade. 1 to 4. Thanked, relied on, consulted, kept. 1 digit. That is the whole comment. And you have known since about the middle of this. I think most of you are 2s and that the honest 3s are rarer than they look. Show me I am wrong. Before the turn, the warning, because there is an ugly version of this and men build it by accident. You can decide. The answer is to withhold. Keep the process undocumented. Stay slightly vague about how the thing works. Be the only one who knows. It does raise your removal cost in the short term. It also destroys you. And here is the mechanism rather than the moral. People spot it. Not straight away, but reliably, inside about 18 months. Because it shows up as a run of small, odd frictions until somebody senior puts 2 of them next to each other. And the second it is spotted, the whole thing flips. A man who is expensive to lose and trusted is an asset. A man who is expensive to lose and not trusted is a problem. And companies solve problems on purpose, on a timeline, and they never show you the timeline. So here is the test that keeps this honest, and you can run it on anything, including advice from anybody else. Could you write this correction on a whiteboard, in front of your manager, without embarrassment? Building the judgment passes that test. So do the relationships, and so does the name outside the building. Withholding does not. That is the whole line, and it is not a compromise, not indispensable. Necessary. Now the turn, and it is not where you have been looking. You have been hearing this as a ladder you climb by doing more. 4 grades, so presumably more effort takes you higher. It is the opposite. Every grade above the second is reached by doing less of exactly what got you the first 2. Look at how it works. Being useful is exactly what pins men to grade 2, and it pins them harder the better they are at it. The more reliable you are, the more the building arranges itself around you, and the more it costs anybody to move you anywhere. You are being held in place by the thing you are best at. Nobody climbs from relied on to consulted by being relied on more. They climb by holding something the reliance cannot reach. And there is a second half, and this one is harder. You have preferred grade 2, because thanks arrives immediately, every week. Warm, unambiguous, and it tells you that you mattered today. Grade 4 takes years, And while you are building it, nothing happens at all. Nobody says, "Well done," for a relationship that will matter in 3 years. There is no receipt. So look at what you actually chose. Across 10 years of Thursdays, you chose a daily confirmation over a position. And it was not stupid, because the confirmation is real, and men need it, and I will not pretend otherwise. But you bought it with the only currency that compounds, and that account has been open for about 20 years. So there it is. 4 grades. Thanked, which is a receipt, and the account closes the instant it is issued. Relied on, which is a role, and roles transfer whole on somebody else's first day. Consulted, which is the first grade about your judgment rather than your output. And kept, which arrives only when losing you weighs more than replacing you, and which nobody reaches by working harder. And the question from the middle, valuable or exploited. Here is my answer, and it is not the comfortable one. He is neither. He is priced at exactly what he asked for, which was nothing. Nobody is exploiting him. He set that price himself, every week, for years, and the building just took him at his word. Calling it exploitation lets him off the hook. And being let off the hook is exactly how a man stays on grade 2 for 20 years. Here is what actually changes, and it is 1 hour, not a plan. This week, put 1 hour into something that would leave the building with you. 1. Not a project, a conversation with somebody outside your reporting line about something other than work. Or writing down, for yourself, the reasoning behind a decision that nobody else understands. Or the first hour of a piece of work with your name on it that somebody outside would recognize. 1 hour against 40. Not ambitious, and that is the point, because ambitious plans die in week 3. And here is what arrives, which is not what you expect. Not security. Nothing produces security, and a man who wants to feel safe should change nothing at all. What arrives is that the next conversation about your future has 2 people in it. At the moment, it has 1. It happens somewhere else, and the outcome is read to you afterwards as a decision that has already been taken. 6 lines. They are yours now. I get kept. Thanks is a receipt. Relied on is a role. I hold the judgment. Losing me costs more. Not indispensable. Necessary. One of those went in harder than the other 5. Put it below with your grade number beside it, and I read all of them. And if you think I am wrong about indispensability, say so properly, because that is the part of this I would most like to be argued out of. Subscribe if this is the kind of thing you want more of. You are one of the pack now, whether you signed up for it or not. Next time, there is a number attached to you that everybody in your building knows and you have never seen. Not your title, not what you are paid, what it would cost to replace you, which somebody could work out in about an hour this afternoon. Most men have never once tried. Say it one more time and mean it. I get kept. Stop supplying. Start holding. And remember what the silver bought and what it did not.